There's something about farmhouses that makes them feel like a world apart, a place frozen in time, filled with history, and sometimes ... things that should have been left behind. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a true story, a disturbing tale that happened on a quiet, remote farmhouse. The kind of story that makes you question what truly lingers in the dark. Story number 1. It was the summer of 1997 when a young couple, Mark and Sarah, decided to escape the city life. They purchased an old farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, a dream come true for them. The property was beautiful yet isolated, with acres of land, a charming red barn, and a house that looked like it had been there forever. But it didn't take long before they started to feel like they weren't alone. At first, it was small things, strange noises in the middle of the night, the sound of footsteps on creaky floorboards when no one else was home. Mark brushed it off as the house settling, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. One night, Mark woke up to the sound of scratching coming from the walls. It was faint but constant, like something was clawing its way through the wood. He thought it was a rat or some small animal, but when he checked, there was nothing. No holes, no signs of rodents, just that eerie, unsettling noise. The real terror began when they decided to explore the basement. It was a space they hadn't paid much attention to, filled with old, forgotten items left behind by previous owners. Mark noticed an odd, heavy wooden door at the far end of the room that was sealed shut. No locks, no handles, just nailed shut with thick, rusted nails. Mark's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to pry the door open. As the nails gave way, a cold, musty smell filled the basement. Behind the door was a small room, barely large enough for a person to stand in. But what they found inside was more disturbing, a series of old, faded photographs pinned to the walls. Photos of families, some smiling, some looking serious, all taken inside the farmhouse. But the last few photos, those were different. They showed a little girl, standing alone in the same room Mark and Sarah were now standing in, staring directly at the camera. Each photograph showed her grown older, but her expression remained the same, empty, almost lifeless. The final photograph was the most chilling. It showed the girl standing beside an open window, looking out into the night, with what seemed like a faint silhouette of someone or something standing behind her. Mark and Sarah were terrified. They had no idea who the girl was or why the photos were there. They nailed the door shut again and decided not to speak of it, hoping it was just a strange, creepy quirk of the house's past. But things got worse. The noises grew louder. The footsteps became more frequent. Sarah even swore she saw a shadow moving across the upstairs hallway one night. And then came the whispers, soft, incoherent, but unmistakably there. It felt like the house itself was alive, angry, and desperate to be heard. Mark and Sarah left the farmhouse after only 6 months, unable to bear the oppressive atmosphere any longer. They never found out who the girl was or why those photographs were hidden away. But those who have passed by the old property since swear they've seen a faint light flickering in the windows at night, and sometimes the faint sound of footsteps echoing in the distance. Some houses are jealous houses, but some, they hold on to their past, and sometimes they never let go. Story number 2. In the late 1980s, the Martin family moved into a sprawling old farmhouse in rural Maine. There was Harold, the father, Linda, the mother, and their 2 children, James and Emily. The house was everything they had dreamed of, quiet, surrounded by nature, and far from the bustling city life. But soon after they moved in, Linda began noticing strange occurrences. It started with the sound of laughter, soft, faint, but distinctly that of a child. Linda would often hear it coming from the attic, especially at night when everyone was asleep. Thinking it was just her imagination or perhaps the wind, she brushed it off. But soon, the laughter was accompanied by something else, a strange thumping sound that echoed through the walls. Linda's curiosity got the better of her, and one night, she decided to investigate. She climbed up to the attic, expecting to find nothing but old furniture and cobwebs. But what she found was far stranger. There was a small rocking horse, dusty and worn, sitting in the center of the attic. It was an antique, clearly something that had been there long before the Martins moved in. Linda thought nothing of it, but that night, she woke up to the sound of the rocking horse moving back and forth, creaking under the weight of something unseen. The next day, Linda asked Harold if he had ever been up to the attic. He hadn't. No one in the family knew how the rocking horse had ended up there, or why it seemed to move on its own. But the strange occurrences didn't stop. Doors would open and close by themselves. Cold drafts would sweep through the house on warm nights, and James began talking about a friend, an invisible friend named Tommy, who lived in the attic. At first, Linda and Harold thought it was just James's imagination. But then James's behavior started to change. He became withdrawn, spending hours alone in the attic. When Linda asked him why he spent so much time up there, James simply said, "Tommy likes it when I visit." Linda's unease grew, especially when James began drawing disturbing images of a boy standing in the attic window, watching the family. Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong, so she decided to dig into the history of the farmhouse. What she discovered was chilling. Decades earlier, the farmhouse had belonged to a reclusive family with a young son named Thomas or Tommy. Tommy had died under mysterious circumstances in the house when he was just 8 years old. His death was never explained, and the family left soon after, abandoning the farmhouse and everything in it. Linda was horrified. She immediately confronted James, asking him to tell her more about Tommy. James described his friend in eerie details he could not have known. He said Tommy was sad, that he missed his family, and that he liked to play on the rocking horse because it reminded him of when he was alive. That night, Linda decided it was time to get rid of the rocking horse, but when she went to the attic, it was gone. As if it had never been there, from that moment on, the haunting escalated. The footsteps grew louder, the laughter more persistent, and James's behavior became increasingly erratic. One night, the family was woken up by the sound of James screaming. When they rushed to his room, they found him huddled in a corner, pointing towards the attic. He said Tommy was angry that Linda had tried to throw away his favorite toy. The Martins didn't stay long after that. They moved out, too terrified to spend another night in the farmhouse. To this day, the house remains abandoned, slowly falling apart. Locals say they still hear the faint sound of a rocking horse creaking in the attic on quiet nights, and sometimes, if you're close enough, the soft laughter of a child echoing through the empty rooms. Not every haunting is about anger or vengeance. Sometimes, it's just a lonely soul clinging to the only home it's ever known. And sometimes, those lost souls find company ... whether we want them to or not. Story number 3. In the fall of 2003, the Jackson family, Steve, Maria, and their teenage daughter Lily moved into an old farmhouse in Northern Virginia. The house had been vacant for years, but the price was unbeatable, and they saw it as the perfect place to start fresh. What they didn't know was that the farmhouse had a dark history, a history that would soon make itself known. At first, everything seemed perfect. The family settled in, enjoying the quiet and the scenic surroundings. But it wasn't long before strange things began to happen. It started with Lily, who began experiencing vivid nightmares soon after moving in. She dreamt of a woman with long, dark hair standing at the foot of her bed, whispering in a language she couldn't understand. Lily tried to brush off the nightmares, but they only grew worse. She would often wake up with scratch marks on her arms and legs, marks that couldn't be explained. One night, she woke up to find her bedroom window wide open, though she was sure she had locked it. She swore she heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, as if someone was circling the house. Lily wasn't the only one who noticed strange occurrences. Steve and Maria began hearing faint voices at night, whispers coming from the old barn out back. When they checked, there was nothing, just the cold, empty barn and the unsettling feeling that they were being watched. The family's dog, normally calm and friendly, refused to go near the barn, barking and growling at the doorway. As the days went on, the hauntings intensified. Objects moved on their own, doors would slam shut without warning. Maria even saw shadowy figures in the reflection of the kitchen window. But the most disturbing moment came one evening when Steve was working late in his home office, located in the old part of the house. He heard the distinct sound of humming, soft, melodic, but undeniably human. Steve followed the sound down the hallway, his heart pounding. As he got closer to the source, he saw her, the woman from Lily's dreams. She was standing at the end of the hallway, her back turned to him, her long, tangled hair draped over her shoulders. She was wearing an old-fashioned dress, stained and tattered. Steve froze, unable to move as the woman slowly turned her head, revealing hollow, lifeless eyes and a twisted smile. Steve ran back to his office, slamming the door behind him. He knew then that this was no ordinary haunting. Something evil had taken up residence in their home, and it was growing stronger by the day. Desperate for answers, the Jacksons reached out to a local historian who had studied the property's history. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. The farmhouse had once belonged to a woman named Margaret Blackwood, who was rumored to be a practitioner of dark rituals. Locals avoided her, whispering that she dabbled in witchcraft and used the barn for strange ceremonies. Margaret was found dead in the house in 1923 under mysterious circumstances, her body discovered at the foot of the staircase with a look of terror frozen on her face. It was said she never left the farmhouse, and those who dared to move in were cursed by her restless spirit. Terrified, the Jacksons decided to bless the house and rid it of whatever was tormenting them. They brought in a priest who performed a cleansing ritual, and for a moment, things seemed to calm down. But it was short-lived. The very next night, they were awakened by the sound of the front door slamming open, followed by loud, angry footsteps stomping through the house. The final straw came when Lily was pulled from her bed by unseen hands, dragged halfway across the room as she screamed for help. Steve and Maria rushed in to find her crying, with red marks on her wrists and ankles, as if she'd been held down. The family packed their things and left the farmhouse that very night, leaving everything behind. The Jacksons never returned, and the farmhouse has remained empty ever since. It's said that on certain nights, you can still hear Margaret's humming drifting through the air, accompanied by the faint sound of footsteps and whispers echoing from the barn. Those who dare to approach feel an overwhelming sense of dread, as if they're being watched by something that wants them gone. Some houses are cursed, stained by the dark deeds of their former inhabitants, and some spirits. They refuse to let go, determined to keep their secrets hidden within those walls forever. Thanks for watching. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, be sure to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more chilling tales. And remember, sometimes, a house is more than just a home. It's a trap.